Welcome to Veiled Narrative Stories, where emotions unfold behind every heartbeat and love finds its way through pain, hope, and destiny. Tonight's story is one that will touch your soul, a tale of redemption, courage, and a love born from the ashes of despair. So sit back, close your eyes, and let your heart listen to what lies beneath the veil. The rain whispered softly against the vast glass walls of the Crawford Empire's penthouse, painting streaks of silver tears down the windows as if the sky itself mourned for the man sitting in silence. Ethan Crawford, the youngest self-made billionaire in the country, had once stood as a symbol of perfection. His name was etched on magazine covers, his charm filled boardrooms, and his decisions shaped markets. But now, none of that mattered, because the man who once stood so tall could no longer stand at all. The car accident had stolen more than his ability to walk. It had stripped away his pride, his freedom, and the illusion of control that he'd spent a lifetime building. He sat in a wheelchair carved from fine mahogany and chrome, a custom piece that reflected his former life of luxury. But no amount of wealth could restore what he'd lost. The penthouse around him was breathtaking: chandeliers made of crystal dust, silk drapes flowing like waves, art pieces that cost more than entire houses. Yet amidst that opulence, Ethan felt nothing but emptiness. The silence was suffocating. The hum of the rain was the only sound brave enough to enter his world. Gone were the endless phone calls, the flashes of cameras, the laughter of his staff during champagne-fueled evenings. Everyone had drifted away. The investors, the friends, even the woman he thought would stand by him. They all disappeared once the man they admired could no longer command a room. In the quiet loneliness, Ethan's mind often replayed the accident. The screech of tires, the shattering of glass, the metallic taste of blood. He remembered the moment of impact, the terrifying second when everything he was built on shattered. Doctors told him he'd never walk again. The world told him to stay strong, but no one stayed long enough to see how strength broke in silence. Every night, he would sit near the window, staring down at the city that once bowed to him. From this height, the skyline glittered like a crown, his crown, but one that now belonged to someone else. He could see his reflection in the glass-sharp cheekbones, tired eyes, and the haunted elegance of a man who had everything and yet nothing. His staff still followed his commands, though they rarely saw him. He had become a ghost in his own empire, his voice echoing through intercoms, his image flickering on conference screens. He told himself he didn't need anyone, that he was fine, that power was enough. But deep down, he knew that power had no warmth. The nights grew longer, the loneliness heavier. He would pour himself a glass of aged whiskey, its amber glow reflecting off the gold accents of the room. He'd trace the rim with his finger, feeling the coldness seep into him. Sometimes, in his weakest moments, he whispered into the darkness, "Don't hurt me. I can't walk." It wasn't a plea for pity. It was a confession of pain, of helplessness, of the one truth he couldn't escape. Then came the day his doctor insisted he start physical therapy. Ethan resisted. The idea of someone witnessing his weakness felt unbearable. But eventually he agreed, reluctantly, bitterly. That's when Liam entered his life. The door opened one morning to reveal a man who didn't seem impressed by wealth or power. Liam's eyes were soft but unyielding, the kind of eyes that carried storms and sunshine all at once. He was dressed simply, dark jeans, a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. But there was a quiet confidence about him. Behind him, peeking shyly from the doorway, was his little daughter, Ella, clutching a stuffed bunny. "Mr. Crawford," Liam said with a respectful nod, "I'm your new physiotherapist." Ethan didn't respond. He just looked at the man and then at the child who smiled despite the coldness of the room. Something about her innocence pierced the steel walls of his heart. Over the next few days, Ethan avoided him as much as possible. He gave curt answers, hid behind sarcasm, and pushed Liam away with every chance he got. But Liam never lost patience. He didn't see Ethan as a billionaire or a broken man. He saw him as someone who had forgotten how to be touched by life. Their first real session was brutal. Ethan clenched his jaw, refusing to show pain. When Liam tried to help him stretch, he winced and whispered through gritted teeth, "Don't hurt me, I can't walk." Liam looked at him, not with pity, but with understanding, and replied softly, "Then we won't walk today. We'll just learn to believe again." It was in that simple exchange that something shifted. For the first time, Ethan felt seen, not as a CEO, not as a patient, but as a human being. That night, he couldn't sleep. The echo of Liam's words lingered in the corners of his mind. We'll just learn to believe again. It was strange, almost unsettling, how those words carried warmth. He didn't understand it yet, but somewhere in the silence, the foundations of his heart began to tremble. Outside, the rain continued to fall, soft, steady, cleansing. The city lights shimmered through the glass like tiny promises. And for the first time in months, Ethan allowed himself to imagine that maybe, just maybe, his story wasn't over. Morning sunlight streamed through the glass walls of Ethan Crawford's penthouse, gilding the marble floors in soft gold. The city below was alive with its usual chaos, horns blaring, taxis gliding through wet streets, the hum of a world that never paused. But inside those high-rise walls, time stood still. Ethan sat in silence, his gaze distant, his expression a portrait of quiet suffering. The once mighty CEO who had commanded empires now couldn't command his own legs. He hadn't expected anyone to enter his life that morning. But destiny often arrives uninvited, and sometimes it walks in wearing a simple white shirt and carrying hope in a pair of gentle eyes. When the elevator doors opened, the sound of small laughter echoed before the man himself appeared. Liam Hart, the new physiotherapist, stepped into the penthouse with calm composure. He wasn't dressed like anyone from Ethan's glittering world of suits and status. His clothes were simple, his energy grounded. But there was something magnetic about him, an understated elegance, a quiet strength that didn't need to shout to be felt. Beside him stood a little girl, Ella, no older than 6. Her hair was tied in 2 uneven braids, and her small hand gripped a stuffed bunny whose ear had been sewn back with pink thread. Her eyes widened as she took in the vast luxury of the place. Crystal chandeliers, grand piano, walls adorned with abstract art, but she didn't seem intimidated. Instead, she smiled brightly and whispered, "Daddy, it's like a castle." Liam smiled down at her, then looked toward Ethan, who sat by the window, watching them with his usual guarded detachment. "Mr. Crawford," Liam greeted politely. "I'm Liam Hart. The hospital assigned me as your physical therapist. I hope it's not too early for our first session." Ethan's voice was cool, clipped. "You brought a child to a patient's home." "She's my daughter," Liam replied simply. "I couldn't find anyone to watch her this morning." "I hope that won't be a problem." Ethan's jaw tightened. He wanted to say it was a problem, but the innocence in the little girl's eyes stopped him. She smiled at him and waved, completely unbothered by his icy demeanor.
"Hi, Mr. Crawford. I'm Ella."
It had been months since anyone had spoken to Ethan like that, without fear, without formality, without expecting anything. Just pure, innocent warmth. He didn't respond, but a part of him, small, hidden, and long buried, stirred. Liam guided Ella to a corner where she sat quietly with her crayons and coloring book. Then he turned to Ethan, his gaze steady. "We'll take it slow today," he said gently, wheeling the therapy table closer. Ethan's instinct was to resist. He didn't want the stranger touching him, seeing his weakness. But there was something about Liam's voice, low, calm, and reassuring, that made resistance feel pointless. The first touch was mechanical, a professional's firm hand beneath his arm, steadying him, guiding his weight. But beneath that, there was something else, compassion, respect. No pity, no rush, no coldness. Liam spoke softly, explaining each movement, each muscle's purpose. His patience was disarming. "Stop," Ethan muttered at one point, sweat beading on his forehead. His breath came shallow and sharp. "Don't hurt me, I can't walk." Liam paused. The air grew still. Then he crouched down, meeting Ethan's eyes. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said quietly. "I'm here to remind your body how to trust again." Something in those words, simple yet profound, broke through Ethan's armor. For the first time in months, someone had spoken to him not as a CEO, not as a broken man, but as a human being in need of care. Behind them, little Ella watched with fascination. "Daddy always says healing takes time," she said matter-of-factly, swinging her feet. "When Mommy went to heaven, I thought I'd never smile again. But Daddy said we can grow new smiles if we believe." Ethan looked at her, this small, brave child who spoke of grief and healing with such innocent faith. Something inside him softened. Days turned into weeks. The sessions grew more regular. Ella's laughter began to fill the cold penthouse, her crayons leaving small rainbows on the corners of Ethan's paperwork. Liam worked with quiet dedication, never pushing too hard, never letting Ethan retreat into darkness again. He brought with him a sense of warmth that didn't belong to this world of glass and gold. It belonged to something simpler, purer. Sometimes they would sit by the window after therapy. sharing coffee while Ella played nearby. Liam would tell him stories about the small town he grew up in, about his late wife, about the little garden he and Ella kept on their apartment balcony. Ethan listened quietly, finding himself drawn to the warmth in Liam's voice, the way he spoke of loss with grace, not bitterness. Ethan began to notice things he had long ignored, the way sunlight looked on Liam's skin, the curve of his smile when Ella made a joke, the gentle care in his touch. It was subtle at first, an ache he didn't have a name for. But with each passing day, that ache deepened. The walls of the penthouse no longer felt like a prison. The sound of Ella's laughter became the melody of his mornings. And Liam, steady, compassionate, unshakably kind, became the rhythm of his healing. One evening, as the city lights shimmered below and the rain began to fall again, Ethan looked at Liam and said softly, "You walk into my world like it was nothing, and suddenly, everything feels alive again." Liam smiled. "Maybe that's what healing is, Ethan, not fixing what's broken, but reminding you it still has beauty." And for the first time, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years, hope. Not the fragile kind that flickers and fades, but the kind that glows quietly, endlessly, the kind that feels like love, still finding its way through the cracks of a wounded heart. The days began to blend into one another, like brushstrokes of soft gold and quiet silver across the canvas of Ethan's life. What had once been sterile silence inside his penthouse was now filled with warmth, laughter, and the faint hum of piano music that Liam sometimes played in the evenings. Healing, Ethan discovered, wasn't a sudden miracle, it was a slow, graceful unfolding, and somehow it always began when Liam entered the room. Each morning carried the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the sound of Ella's small feet padding across the marble floor. She would climb into Ethan's lap without hesitation, reading her storybooks aloud while Liam prepared the therapy equipment. For the first time, Ethan didn't dread mornings, he waited for them. Liam worked with patience that seemed otherworldly. His hands, steady and gentle, guided Ethan through every exercise. There was strength in his touch, firm enough to challenge him, soft enough to comfort. When pain crept in, Ethan would wince, muttering, "It's too much, I can't." But Liam would whisper, "Breathe through it. Healing doesn't come from avoiding pain, it comes from trusting that you can survive it." It wasn't just his body Liam was healing, it was his soul. The walls Ethan had built, the bitterness he had nurtured, they began to crumble under the quiet persistence of Liam's kindness. There were moments between them that felt fragile, almost sacred. The way Liam would steady Ethan's trembling hands, the way Ethan's eyes lingered on Liam's smile a little too long, the way their silence carried meaning, unspoken, yet understood. One late afternoon, as the golden light poured through the windows, painting the room in honeyed hues, Liam adjusted Ethan's legs into position. His fingers brushed against Ethan's skin, just briefly, unintentionally, but the touch ignited something electric between them. Ethan's breath hitched. Liam froze for a moment, meeting his gaze. The air between them felt charged, intimate, suspended in something neither of them dared to name. Ethan looked away first, his voice rough. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean." Liam shook his head gently. "You don't need to apologize for feeling human." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, the city glittering beneath him, and for the first time, he realized that what he felt wasn't dependence, it was longing. A longing for connection, for warmth, for the man who had walked into his broken life and taught him to breathe again. In the weeks that followed, therapy became something deeper than physical recovery. It became shared laughter, late-night conversations, and subtle glances that said more than words ever could. Liam began bringing small pieces of his world into Ethan's, fresh flowers for the dining table, stories from the park, sketches Ella made of Uncle Ethan standing tall. One evening, as rain pattered softly against the windows, Liam brought a small Bluetooth speaker. He played a slow piano piece, something soulful, wistful. "It helps with balance," he said. "Music keeps the rhythm of the body." Ethan chuckled. "You're turning me into a poet, Hart." Liam grinned. "Maybe you already were one. You just forgot how to listen." He placed Ethan's hand on his shoulder, guiding him up slowly from the chair. For the first time in months, Ethan felt his body respond, not perfectly, not gracefully, but with strength. He swayed, clutched Liam's arm tighter, his forehead brushing against Liam's temple. "I'm standing," he whispered, his voice breaking. Liam smiled, eyes glistening. "You are." They stayed like that for a moment, two souls, fragile yet strong, holding on to something far greater than gravity. Ethan could feel Liam's heartbeat beneath his palm, steady and calm. It wasn't just physical contact, it was connection, raw and real. As days turned to nights, Ethan's world bloomed again. The once cold penthouse felt alive, with laughter, with love, with the faint scent of jasmine that Liam brought every Sunday. The two men had fallen into a rhythm, a quiet symphony of healing laughter, and unspoken affection. One night, after Ella had gone to bed, Ethan asked softly, "Do you ever feel like you're healing me in ways that have nothing to do with therapy?" Liam looked up from the couch, his eyes searching Ethan's. "Maybe we're healing each other," he said quietly. Ethan's gaze softened. "How so?" Liam hesitated, then whispered, "You remind me that even after loss, love can return, maybe not the same way, but sometimes even stronger." That confession hung in the air, trembling with truth. Ethan felt something inside him shatter, something dark, something lonely, and in its place bloomed a warmth he hadn't known in years. In the days that followed, he found himself smiling more easily, laughing more freely. His reflection in the mirror no longer looked haunted, it looked alive. And every time Liam entered the room, that light inside him grew brighter. Healing through love, Ethan realized, wasn't just about movement, it was about meaning. It was about the hands that steadied him, the heart that believed in him, and the quiet, powerful truth that sometimes love doesn't need grand gestures. Sometimes it heals simply by being there. And when Liam smiled at him, softly, tenderly, as though he could see straight into the pieces of his soul, Ethan knew that he was no longer broken. He was becoming whole again, piece by piece, heartbeat by heartbeat, in the hands of the man who had shown him that even shattered things can shine. Morning sunlight spilled across the penthouse like liquid gold, warming every corner that had once been wrapped in silence. The laughter of a child danced through the halls, replacing the cold echo of loneliness with something bright, something alive. Ella Hart, the little girl with starry eyes and a heart too big for her age, had become the pulse of Ethan Crawford's new life. It was strange, he thought, how easily she fit into his world. The penthouse that once felt like a museum of glass and marble now carried traces of her everywhere. Tiny handprints on the piano, scattered crayons on his designer desk, and paper flowers taped to the mirror beside his wheelchair. Each morning, she would burst into the room carrying a smile so pure it disarmed even the most guarded parts of him. "Good morning, Crawford," she'd chirp, waving her bunny in the air. "Are you ready to walk today?" Ethan couldn't help but smile. "You make it sound so simple, Ella." She'd giggle, her curls bouncing.
Because it is.
"Daddy says the body listens to the heart, and your heart wants to walk." Those words stayed with him far longer than she ever realized. There was something magical about Ella, something that made even pain feel lighter. Her innocence carried wisdom beyond her years, born perhaps from loss and love. Ethan knew she had lost her mother young, yet she never spoke of sadness. Her world was painted in hope, and somehow she made him believe in it too. Every therapy session began the same way. Liam would guide Ethan through slow movements, patient and precise, while Ella sat nearby sketching on the floor. Sometimes she'd draw Ethan standing tall, holding her hand, both of them surrounded by hearts and flowers. She'd then run to him and proudly tape her drawings to the wall beside his chair. "This is for you," she'd say. "It's a picture of the future."
"You're smiling in this one?"
He would look at her, eyes softening, and reply, "Then I'll make sure I smile that way when it happens." One afternoon, as rain poured softly outside, Ethan sat by the window watching the city fade into mist. Liam had stepped away to take a call, leaving him alone with Ella. She climbed into the chair beside him, her bunny tucked under her arm. "Do you miss walking?" she asked, her voice small but sincere. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "More than I can say." She was quiet for a moment, then reached out and placed her tiny hand over his. "Daddy says when Mommy went to heaven, I couldn't stop crying. I told him I'd never laugh again. But he said, if you stop laughing she'll stop shining. So I laughed even when it hurt." Her words hit him like sunlight breaking through clouds. He looked at her, his throat tightening. "You're very brave, Ella," she smiled. "You are too. You just forgot." When Liam returned, he found them both laughing, Ella showing Ethan her newest drawing of Mr. Crawford the superhero. From that day on, the penthouse walls became a gallery of her hope, pictures of Ethan running, dancing, even flying. It wasn't just art, it was belief made visible. Weeks turned into months. The progress was slow but undeniable. Ethan could now stand with support, his body trembling but alive. Each milestone was celebrated with childlike joy. Ella clapping her hands, Liam smiling proudly, and Ethan feeling something inside him blossom again. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in lavender and rose, Liam suggested a walk in the rooftop garden. With Liam's steady hand and Ella's excited cheers, Ethan took his first steps in open air. The scent of rain-soaked jasmine filled the night, and the city glittered below them like 1,000 whispered promises. Ella held his hand, her tiny fingers curled around his. "See, I told you your heart would remember," she said, her voice full of wonder. Ethan's breath caught. "I didn't do this alone, Ella. You and your daddy. You both gave me something to stand for." She looked up at him with a grin that melted him completely. "Then don't ever stop standing for love." That night, after Ella fell asleep, Ethan and Liam sat on the balcony, the city lights shimmering below. The silence between them was peaceful, filled with the soft hum of something unspoken but deeply understood. "She believes in you," Liam said quietly. "Sometimes I think she believes in you more than you do." Ethan smiled faintly. "She reminds me of everything I forgot, of everything that matters." Liam turned toward him, eyes glimmering with emotion. "And what's that?" "That love," Ethan whispered, "who'sn't weakness. It's the only thing that truly heals." Liam reached across the table and touched Ethan's hand. A quiet gesture, but one that spoke of everything they didn't need to say. From that night on, Ethan wasn't just walking for himself. He was walking for Ella's faith, for Liam's patience, for the love that had woven itself quietly into his life. Every sunrise felt different now, softer, warmer, like a promise fulfilled. The man who had once begged, "Don't hurt me, I can't walk," was now learning to take steps toward a future built on something far greater than success. He was walking toward love, pure, imperfect, breathtaking love, born from a child's innocent hope, and in that hope he found not just strength but redemption. Because sometimes, it isn't the strongest hearts that heal us, it's the smallest ones that believe we can. The first snowfall of winter drifted silently past the tall glass walls of the Crawford penthouse, each flake shimmering like a fragment of heaven. The city below glowed softly beneath its white blanket, and the air inside carried the warmth of a crackling fireplace. The once cold and lonely space now felt like a home, alive with laughter, music, and something Ethan Crawford had thought he would never feel again: love. Months had passed since Liam and his daughter Ella had entered Ethan's life, bringing color to a world that had faded to gray. What began as therapy had transformed into something sacred, something unspoken but deeply felt. It wasn't just Ethan's body that had healed, it was his heart. The part of him that had been numb for years. Every morning began with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, soft jazz playing in the background, and Ella's laughter echoing from room to room. She would run to Ethan's wheelchair, her curls bouncing, and announce the day's walking mission, as though it were an adventure. Liam would smile, always patient, always near, his presence as constant as the sunrise. The sessions grew easier, Ethan's step steadier, his heart lighter. But the real transformation wasn't measured in movements. It was in moments. In the quiet glances exchanged between him and Liam. In the shared smiles that lingered longer than they should. In the warmth that filled the room whenever they stood too close. Love had crept into Ethan's life like dawn, soft, unhurried, unstoppable. One evening, as snow whispered against the windows, Ethan stood by the grand piano, his cane steady in his hand. He played softly, a melody he hadn't touched in years. Liam listened from the couch, eyes closed, the music wrapping around them like silk. When the final note faded, Ethan turned, his heart pounding. "You know," he said quietly, "before the accident, I played this for someone who loved me. But I never played it with love, not like tonight." Liam looked up, his voice a whisper. "Then tonight, you're truly playing it for the first time." Their eyes met, one look that said everything words couldn't. In that silence, something shifted, something gentle yet powerful. Ethan took a careful step forward, closing the space between them. His hand brushed Liam's, fingers trembling, yet full of certainty. "Thank you," Ethan murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "For saving me. For seeing me when I couldn't even look at myself." The Liam smiled faintly. "You were never broken, Ethan. You just needed someone to remind you that love still lives inside you." Ethan's throat tightened. "And you did." For a moment, they stood close enough to feel each other's breath, the firelight painting them in gold. It wasn't just attraction, it was connection, pure and undeniable. Two souls who had found each other not by chance but by destiny. The door opened then, and Ella's small voice cut through the silence.
Uncle Ethan, Daddy! Come see!
It's snowing. They both laughed softly, the tension melting into tenderness. Together, they joined her at the window, watching as snowflakes twirled through the night sky. Ella pressed her little hand against the glass, whispering, "It looks like the sky is sending kisses." Ethan smiled. "Maybe it is." Later that week, Ella had her school recital, a simple event in a small auditorium, but for Ethan it felt monumental. He hadn't attended a public gathering since his accident. The idea of facing people, of showing his vulnerability, terrified him. But Liam had gently insisted. "You've spent too long hiding from the world," Liam said. "It's time you let the world see you rise." And so, on a chilly December evening, Ethan put on a black tailored coat, his hands shaking slightly as he held his cane. Liam stood beside him, calm and steady, while Ella twirled in her little blue dress, her excitement contagious. When they entered the hall, whispers followed. The famous CEO, once a symbol of invincibility, now walking slowly with visible effort. But Ethan didn't care, because at the end of the aisle, under the soft glow of the stage lights, Ella smiled at him. During her performance, she spotted him in the audience and waved proudly.
Look, Daddy!
"Look, Uncle Ethan! I'm dancing just like you said I could." Tears filled Ethan's eyes as he realized the truth. This little girl had become his hope, just as much as he had become hers. When the recital ended, Ella ran into his arms. For the first time he didn't remain seated. He stood, unsteady, trembling, but standing. The crowd gasped, then erupted into applause. Liam's eyes met his from across the room, full of pride and love. Ethan's voice was barely a whisper, trembling with emotion. "I'm standing." Liam crossed the distance between them, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You're more than standing, Ethan. You're living again." And as they stood together under the soft glow of the lights, with Ella laughing between them, Ethan finally understood the lesson love had been trying to teach him all along. Pain doesn't destroy us, it shapes us, it humbles us, it leads us to the people who make us whole again. Love, he realized, doesn't come to fix us. It comes to remind us that we were never beyond repair. That night, as snow continued to fall outside, Ethan looked at Liam and whispered, "You didn't just help me walk, you taught me how to love." Liam smiled, his eyes glimmering. "Then let's keep walking, together." And so, beneath the quiet beauty of a city reborn in snow, the man who once begged not to be hurt found the one heart that would never hurt him. The one that healed him instead. Because love, in its purest form, doesn't just restore what pain took. It gives back even more than was ever lost. Love is not a grand gesture. It is a quiet miracle that unfolds in the smallest of moments. It is the gentle brush of fingers that steadies a trembling hand, the voice that says, "You're not alone," when the world goes silent, and the presence that stays long after everyone else has gone. Ethan's journey began in darkness, a man trapped by pain, by memories, by the weight of what he had lost. But life, in its mysterious mercy, sent him not a cure but companions, a child whose innocence reignited his laughter, a healer whose soul carried the same scars. And through them, Ethan rediscovered something that no medicine, no fortune, no power could ever give, the courage to love again. In the end, his greatest victory was not walking, it was feeling. Feeling warmth where there had been only cold, feeling connection where there had been isolation, feeling love in its purest, most human form. Liam taught him that healing is not the absence of pain, it is the presence of hope. That sometimes, the people who enter our lives quietly are the ones who change its rhythm forever. And that even the most shattered hearts can find a melody again when touched by genuine care. As snow fell softly outside the Crawford penthouse that final night, Ethan realized something profound: the universe doesn't take without giving back. It may strip us bare, break us open, and test every fragment of who we are. But it also sends love in unexpected forms, disguised as strangers who walk into our stories just when we've forgotten how to believe. And so, standing beside Liam and little Ella, Ethan finally understood that his pain had been the path all along. Every fall had led him here, to this warmth, this peace, this love that didn't need to be perfect to be real. Because true love isn't about who saves you. It's about who stays with you while you learn to save yourself. In the luxurious stillness of that snow-lit night, Ethan smiled. The man who once lived behind walls of marble and regret had finally found his home, not in a mansion but in a heartbeat, and with that, his story whispered its final truth: love doesn't just heal the broken. It turns the broken into something beautifully whole.